Does anyone know what? Okay. Yeah. Out there racing by people. That's what's happening. Yes, it can. We are about to test that. Ooh. Okay, where did that?
When I went down to the bottom, it brought the dock up.
Oh, okay.
There that is.
Cool. Thank you. I'm sorry. I can't help it. I know, the Battle of the Laurens. There's some definite symmetry happening. And then Salem's going to come and just ruin the whole thing. Yeah, Salem's having a family emergency, so they're just going to be a little late. I know. Hey, panel. I think I'm okay to just start. It's 3 minutes is enough to gay time. Hello, everyone. I think we're done giving people gay time, and we're just going to go ahead and start. Hi, everybody. A little bit of a disclaimer. I don't ever speak publicly, like to people, so I'm very nervous today. Please bear with me. If I throw up, just don't look at it. Oh, I'm allowed to take this off. Hi, everybody. So my name is Nico Lang. Thank you so much for coming to this and enjoying my hastily put together slide by celebrities. Our panel is B is the majority in LGBTQ. I would just like to begin by presenting some of my lovely co-panelists here who are here on the next slide. So rather than just having everybody read off their bios, which like no shame to that, I just thought I would have people introduce themselves. So Lauren, do you want to go ahead and start? We're going to do names, pronouns, professional affiliation, and then your personal bicon. Oh yeah, the spirit stick. That's what we're calling it.
Hello. I'm a late addition to this panel, so bear with me as we go on this journey together. I'm Lauren McGaughy. I use she, her pronouns, and I work at the Dallas Morning News, but I'm based in Austin, so I'm in the State Capitol Bureau. Thank you. Cool, thanks. Woo. I don't know if this is like not kosher person to choose because they're not actually like, yes, this person is bi, but I always read Mercutio from Romeo and Juliet as very bi coded, and a lot of people think he's just like full on gay, but I always read him as very bi coded, and I think he's lovely and amazing, and he's the best wingman and may also be in love with Romeo, but also likes ladies. And in the movie, he's like super hot and it also does drag. So
Who is Mercutio in the movie?
I'm not going to remember the actor's name.
I don't know. He was good looking,
Yeah,
whoever he was.
very, very attractive.
Call us Mercutio. And then, yeah, Salem. So we're doing names, pronouns of professional affiliation, and then your bicon. Bicon, yes. A portmanteau I was going to say a portmanteau for bi-icon for people who are not initiated. Got it.
I just want to apologize. First of all, my name is Salem Kalojulan. My pronouns are she or they. Coming out to your family over and over again just means that they feel more comfortable calling you at the last minute for incredibly unimportant things, guised as emergencies. So I just got back from Rockford. Thank you very much. Boy, my arms are tired from flying. I am on the staff at the Chicago Reader here in Chicago. I'm the managing editor, and we're a regional paper with sometimes a national focus. And I'm trying to think of who my bicon would be. Yeah. I actually, I feel like Drew Barrymore had potential because she happened to be bi for a few years there. Isn't always open about it anymore, I guess. Just because, she carved her own path in a certain way. I mean, starting, at third base, but she still carved something, and she has a really nice makeup line. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not prepared.
All right, I guess I'll go next. My name's Augie Rodriguez. My pronouns are he, they. I am the current president of the board of directors of Bisexual Queer Alliance Chicago, which is a non-for-profit based here in Chicago and has been around for it'll be 12 years in October that we've been going strong. I'm a customer service representative by day. I'm also the founder of AR Film Chicago. You can find us on YouTube. I've also content created for the organization under BQuack Chicago. Favorite bicon? Why would you ask a bisexual a favorite bicon? That's like hard to ask.
Because I'm very messy.
Well, aren't we all? But anyway.
Yeah, yes, that's what
I
this
can't
panel's
give you
about.
one, but I'll give you three.
Love that. Go for it.
My first two male bicons are going to be Freddie Mercury and David Bowie.
Love
and
that.
when it comes to female bicons, I love me some Lady Gaga. So yeah, I'm going to pass it on to Adrian.
Oh, also, Augie just got married. Can we give Augie a round of applause? Yeah, to this man down front taking all the photos.
We thank you. My name is Adrian McHugh. I go by she, her. I am the president and executive director of Step Up for Mental Health, a nonprofit in Chicago, but also started in 2009 Bisocial Network, which had about like 18,000 members every month. It was pretty cool. And we merged that in because mental health is real. And now it's one of our programs. My icon, which is very hard because Linda Carter just came out and said that Wonder Woman is bi. So I was like, yes, on Twitter. But I also love my favorite person, River Song from Doctor Who, because she was badass, she was cool, she was just a lovely person. I love that character. And if I said something real, I guess I have to say Alan Cummings, because he joined our I Am Visible campaign back in 2010. And I really love that I am visible. And so I have to give him some kudos and love today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Lauren Beach, and I use they and she pronouns interchangeably. That makes me feel great when people use them kind of one after the other. I am a faculty member at Northwestern Feinberg School of Medicine, and I'm there on the core faculty of the Institute for Sexual and Gender Minority Health and Wellbeing. I'm also one of the founding members of the Visibility Impact Fund, which is the first grassroots giving circle for BI+ people. And to date, we have given out $25,000 in grants to people who are running BI programs and LGBTQ organizations, as well as to BI Plus specific community orgs. And I think that, as you'll see in the introductory slides, obviously everyone's here for a reason, right? It's important to represent the B, and part of that representation also means fighting for equality, and that requires resources, time, and really things like this. So with that, I will turn it over back to our esteemed moderator, Nico. It's great to be with you all here this morning.
Thank you, everyone. Also, unfortunately, if you saw in the brochure that Tiffany the Mall Girl was part of our panel, apparently, it was a weird typo. Unfortunately, Tiffany will not be with us today, but we will think of her always. Also, in the interest of full disclosure, I also have not said my BICON. So when I was young and I needed to come out to people and I needed a really easy, tangible way to do it, I would say, I would bring up Angelina Jolie, and I'd start talking to them about Angelina Jolie's personal life. Like, she's dated women, but she's now dating a man, which at the time was Brad Pitt. And I would say, well, it's fly to be bi. I would know. And see, I've been doing that for like 20 years now. So thank you, Angelina Jolie, for your service. You made a real big difference. Other than that, I would also say I used to get kicked out of history class a lot for reading Gore Vidal essays in the back of class, which was not part of the lesson. So yeah, thanks, Gore. My GPA would have been a lot better if I had paid attention. So I wanted to begin, before we begin our discussion with our esteemed panelists, by just presenting some data, because as a reporter, I think it's just important to be grounded in facts and data. So I'm just going to present some very important research on the sort of like bi stigma, bi phobia, and bi invisibility that people experience. It's only going to go on for like 5 minutes. I've been rehearsing so that way I can get through it real quick. I was going to get off book by this morning, which theater nerd, but that did not happen. So note cards, here we are. So refer to the slide. So the rise in bi identification that we see here is largely driven by bi women. A 2019 General Social Survey found that 1 in 8 women between 18 and 34 identify as bisexual. Black women particularly were 3 times as likely to identify as bi than they were a decade ago. Trans people are also driving high rates of bi identification among LGBTQ+ people. 1/3 of trans people in NCTE's 2015 US trans survey said they were bi or pan. Oh, wait. Did I do this backward? Oh, I see. It's 2 slides. I didn't put that in the note cards. So yeah, basically just refer to sort of the data here. I think it's really illuminating to the fact that that bi folks, while often being erased in mainstream media representation, make up consistently more than 50% of LGBT folks in almost every survey. There's actually a comparative index here from the Williams Institute that showed how often that this is the case, and I thought that that visual was really compelling. Unfortunately, though, despite the fact that we make up the largest segment of the LGBT community, we are some of the least likely to be out. So in addition to some of the data you see there, I thought it was really interesting that when I was doing research for this, I couldn't find the first bi character to ever appear on a TV show. You can find things like first lesbian character, first gay character, first trans character. When it came to bi characters, that was really hard to find, and there was actually a lot of argument as to whether those characters even identified as bi, like Stephen Carrington in Dynasty in the 1980s, which I admit to never having seen, so sorry. Or a character like Richie from My So-Called Life, or Willow from Buffy was another one that came up a lot. People argued about, is Buffy bi? Is Willow bi? I wish that Buffy were bi. Is Willow bi? Is Willow a lesbian? Because they don't really define it in the show, and I think it sort of like speaks to the fact that we just haven't had language for a lot of this for a really long time. So it's like people felt they couldn't be out because they just didn't have the ability to see themselves. And I think that matters a great deal. And in terms of this, what I wanted to read while you read this beautiful data were some quotes from TV shows on bisexuality. You probably know a lot of these already. I'm sorry in advance. So Carrie Bradshaw in an episode of Sex and the City once called bisexuality a layover on the way to Gaytown. Liz Lemon of 30 Rock, who I do love, called bisexuality. They just something they just invented in the 90s to sell hair product. And Alice from the L Word once said, "You're right, bisexuality is gross. I see it now." And then my personal favorite, here's Kurt from Glee. "Bisexual is a term that gay guys in high school use when they want to hold hands with girls and feel like a normal person for a change." So if you're sort of looking at like this trauma that bi people are experiencing in our lives, I think that one of the things that the panel is going to reinforce is that media is a really big part of that. Like, as I just said, you can't be yourself often until you see yourself, but often if you see yourself depicted in a negative way or people like you depicted in a negative way, it makes you really fearful to disclose to the people in your lives just basic facts about yourself. And here we go. Yeah, that was in fact an info dump. Sorry about that. I said I was very nervous. And all of these things together contribute to consistently worse health outcomes for bi people. I sort of really want to refer to this list here. So elevated rates of depression, mood disorders, anxiety, alcohol dependency, and like literal like physical health disparities. So you see things like higher rates of cancer, which is often due to higher rates of smoking. And it's not like these things are like inherent to the lives of bisexuals who experience joy and the rest of it in the same way everybody else does. But it's just sort of the stigma and the prejudice that you deal with in your daily life. It makes a really big deal. So yeah, that's all the talking I'm going to be doing for a while. I'm going to go die now, and I'm going to turn it over to our panel. I've got some questions right here. So they got the questions ahead of time, but I'm going to warn my panelists that I asked lots of follow-ups. So I know, I'm sorry, I'm a reporter. What you gonna do? So there might be, like, if you say something really interesting, I might be like, oh, please tell me more about that. So just that way you're not surprised. And also, rather than saving everybody's questions for the end, I would like this to be a little more interactive. If you hear something interesting, feel free to ask a question about it. I would say just time-wise, because I have a feeling that we're gonna have a lot of strong opinions about a lot of these questions. We probably at best only have time for 2 questions in between. So if we can be mindful of that, I just really, really appreciate that. And thank you so much again. Okay, so when was the first time you ever felt represented in the media as a bi person? And if the answer is you haven't, then that's okay too.
I thought about this one, and I actually like had to Google bi characters because I was like, I had the same problem where I was like, when did I remember seeing myself anywhere? And this is gonna sound terrible maybe, but it might have been David Rose, honestly. And just being like, I like red wine, I like white wine, I like wine, and I drink it all. And that not having to be strange, and it was just a short conversation, and then they moved on. So
So I think for me, any character that is on a show or in a movie that doesn't say I am bisexual, I don't relate to. I am extremely out, right? I have been out as bisexual since 1998. And there was a press release that came out in 2006 that identified me as bisexual because I was a point scholar, and it went out over the AP, and I was like, well, the cat's out of the bag now. And so for me, the person I'm going to name is a lot more recent in time, and that's Sara Ramirez. And both in terms of the roles with Grey's Anatomy and saying the B and LGBTQ doesn't just stand for badass. Well, okay, it kind of does, but it also stands for bisexual, right? And then coming out as bisexual, and with Madam Secretary coming out as non-binary, because I'm a bisexual, non-binary person. And so I wanted to say also, why did this coming out experience matter, or why did I relate to it? It's because it was a representation of fluidity, both in sexuality and in gender. And so that was the representation that made me feel seen. And I would say that Sara is one of my 2 bicons. The other one would be Robin Oakes, who's been doing bi+ activism for a very long time, since the 1980s, and has been out for over 40 years, and really was the first person I had seen at an LGBTQ conference or event. We actually brought Robin to speak at Michigan State University when I was an undergraduate, and she told me that you can really be bisexual. Because I was a student organizer in LGBT contexts, and basically I had lesbian and gay organizers tell me bisexuality isn't a thing. the first person to tell me that I could be me was actually the advisor to that group, who was a gay man. And that was really nice because I was like, well, what am I supposed to do then, or call myself if I can't be bisexual, because I don't know what else to call. What else am I? And then Robin was the first person who was brought in as a bisexual speaker on campus, who was like, yep, I'm here to be the B in LGBT. So it's kind of a longer answer, but I think that across the board, representation matters in all aspects of our lives, in media and in real life, because you're right. The media lets you know that you can be the B, but then people in real life also that you know can be so powerful to help you reinforce that and feel supported.
Absolutely. And that was a beautiful answer.
I don't have anything. I mean, I did not see anything really that represented me as the B, as a Black woman. Not really. I kind of like really coming of age stuff that's really weird. Like, I know I'm an older person, but I really like this new series on Netflix called Heartstoppers. I know, I'm so old. But why do I like this? Because that kid who came out by, and I can't think of his name right now, that kind of was me. I had no clue. When I was growing up, just gonna give you a little thing. I had a best friend, you know, best friend girl, and she actually hit on me. I didn't know. We were very young, like 9. But I was into like this person who happens to be female identified. And so but I knew I'm gonna date myself. I know I'm dating myself, but I had a thing for like Rick Springfield. I know, and it's always on my wall, and I had like 100 pictures up there. So I knew I wasn't straight in any way. I knew I wasn't, lesbian in any way. So I didn't identify, and I was a weird kid anyway. I lived on the south side of Chicago, like in Rick Springfield. People thought I was weird. But my closest friend lived across the street. We had a little fling, but nobody knew, and for a long, long, long time. And so I never seen anything really. So I always kind of go through these things like, I want to see a kind of coming of age. And those are usually my things where I kind of didn't know terminology. I didn't know what it meant to be bi. I identify as bi plus now. And that is kind of like, oh, me going on internet and checking out, see, oh, what is this? Oh, I think that's me. I actually had a friend of mine when I was in college who was gay. He said, I think you're bi. I'm like, really? I said, yeah, that does fit. I had no clue about the terminology. And I think, so everybody's unique and different. It just fit. And that's me.
I guess for me, I've always listened to, I'm a millennial, but I've always listened to different genres of music thanks to my dad, being a boomer. And but Queen was like huge for me growing up. So like Freddie Mercury has been like a huge bicon, but me also being a Latino, a couple of folks that recently came out by that Lauren Beach had mentioned, Sara Ramirez, and also Stephanie Beatrice. So it's like having that representation of being bisexual and also person of color has been really awesome. And then kind of piggybacking off to what Lauren said, not just on the celebrity side, but people that we know. Like for her, it's been her, they, it's been Robin Oakes. But for me personally, I came out to Lauren 4 years ago, and since then, she has been my icon as a bisexual and like just living out her truth for 20 years. And I know I'm a bi baby, but like still like to go from there to where I'm at today, like thank you for that. And I just wanted to share that.
I think if we're just talking about media representation, The first character on television that I remember identifying for myself as someone who I thought was bisexual, and this was on television when I was in grade school, but The Facts of Life, the TV show, had this character, Joel Polnicek, who was like the tomboy, tough person, could fix motorcycles, came from somewhere that the other girls did not, to this, boarding school in the Hamptons, and but then they always brought back her boyfriend Eddie from the Bronx. And why is she going out with Eddie? She doesn't seem like she would go out with Eddie, but she really loved Eddie. So just kind of seeing that whole storyline take place informed a little bit of like, okay, maybe there's this more complicated thing going on here. But later on, I don't know if anybody remembers anymore that Ellen DeGeneres had a comedy show before she had a talk show, right? It was a sitcom where it was just Ellen's life in LA. And for a couple seasons, Ellen was just working at a bookstore and living life in LA and going on bad dates with guys. And, and then finally they had Ellen come out. I think this might have been, it's still stuck in my mind and it's random, but there was an episode where Ellen goes to get a mortgage, right? And the mortgage banker was played by this guy that I now know is a television writer that's been around for a long time. Don, I think his last name is King, I can't remember. I'd have to look it up, but he's a very, I'd say like character actor who looks like a lot of people's dad, right? Just, kind of like white suburban dude, nothing really remarkable. And there's this scene when Ellen is signing her mortgage. This person has nothing to do with the plot. And Ellen decides to come out in signing the mortgage to her mortgage banker because she has a girlfriend, and the mortgage banker basically brushes it off and says, well, actually, I'm bi, and then continues on with the transaction. And that was a fundamental part of my college experience, was seeing that sitcom and telling people how boring and bland and unexciting that conversation was and how we should replicate it every day in every way, so fundamental part of my existence.
Love that. I think mine would have been, does anybody remember the remake of The Haunting with Owen Wilson and Catherine Zeta-Jones? Also, Lily Taylor was in it. She was the only good part of the movie. So there's this scene where Catherine Zeta-Jones's character says that she has a boyfriend and a girlfriend and they don't like each other very much. And I was probably 11 when I saw that, and my mind exploded. I was just like, are you aware of the math lady meme? Where it's like a woman just like looking off into the distance, but she's doing math. That was me at 11. And it like profoundly changed my life in that, because it's just a throwaway scene in a movie, right? But I didn't even know that something like that was possible, right? That wasn't a part of like my reality, my existence. And it's funny how these things that are so small can have such like incredible impacts on us. And I believe we have our first question.
Sure, I loved those answers. My question in hearing this discrimination coming from within the LGBT community towards bi people come up is actually, do you guys have strong feelings about the name of this conference? Because I feel like it's so outdated, and I'm curious, like this is my first time here, so I can't really come in and judge, but it has to have come up already, like about including bi and trans people in the name. And it's hard for me to understand like why that decision hasn't already been made and like changed. So does anybody have strong feelings or
I will
non-strong
couch one
feelings
thing.
about
I
that?
actually think this is something a lot of LGBT organizations have been dealing with over the past couple decades. Because if you notice, a lot of the acronyms of LGBT groups are still like L and G. Like you've got GLAAD, which is GLAAD. And they don't use the full name anymore, but they still use the acronym. And a lot of like GLSEN has done the same thing. PFLAG has done the same thing. PFLAG, it's literally like parents and friends of lesbians and gays, but they don't usually refer to the title, like the full title anymore. They say we just go by the acronym. So I do think that this is something that isn't exclusive to NLGJA, but it's something that's so important because it still sends a message to people, whether they know about like that that's a wider struggle that the LGBT movement has been having. They still feel like they look at that and go, oh, this isn't a place for me. So thank you for bringing that question up. I will say we're sort of running behind on time, so
All right, I'll try to make this short. but,
please, love that for you.
I mean, yeah, I mean, this is my first conference, and I'm bisexual, and I'm also the president of the board of directors for Bisexual Queer Alliance Chicago. And for us, and Hugo, my husband, could attest to this, like, we really try to, like, when it comes to our programming, whether it's virtual or in person, we're very inclusive of bi and queer individuals and want them to feel safe, you know, in the spaces that we cultivate. That's just been a huge thing, like in my position of leadership on the board for the last 3 years. And I feel like, regardless of you being bi or queer, if you're part of a queer organization, you should definitely have that inclusivity of everybody under the spectrum and not specifically uh, one or two or three different groups, and obviously, like, piggybacking off of what you said, this is something that's been going on for over 3 decades. So it's something that we're still trying to figure out and being a bit more inclusive, but that's something that we've always been doing over at BQAC. Anybody else want to
I
share?
just want to say one thing because I know we're short.
Yeah, go for it.
Because okay, this is going to be probably dramatic, but I, I have a background in communication, so for me, I get really frustrated by terms not used, particularly bi plus, bisexual, because it's all about the branding. I mean, I kind of can't stress the branding and how important branding is. And just like, I was thinking about the, Black Lives Matter, for example, and how, for 10 years before, it was people wanted to say African American, for example. And we all kind of went back to the, the Black. And it's really about what people understand, and what resonates with communities. And I think that we have to utilize these terms. I know people don't want to say labels and things like that, but I think labels do matter, and I don't care what people say. And that's my conflict issue, that I can't walk down the street and people won't see me as a Black 6 foot tall woman. And so why should I not see representation in the bike spectrum? Why can't we use terms like that? And because it's understood, I know internally things that we do in our personal lives and things like that, but I really believe that we must start using language that people in general understand, especially when it comes to branding. And I know that's probably like, oh my God, I can't believe she said that, but it really matters. So that's just my take on it.
Yeah, no, that's great answer.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a little nervous up here, but I have a couple questions.
Can we keep it to one?
I can
We're
keep it
already
to-
halfay through our
I
time.
have three, but I'll pick my best one.
Yeah, you get one. So pick your favorite.
All right. Well, I guess it'll be more. I guess it'll be more to me. I guess more specific to my situations. I am what you would call, I guess, a late bloomer. I didn't learn later until in life that about my sexuality. Like, I always felt like I was dating women. It was not a big deal for me, to like do less masculine things. But for me, that didn't make me a gay person, or a bisexual person. It was only later in life that I understood like my sexuality and, like, I guess the box that like I was being put in. So my question though is more narrow and specific to the Black community. So there's obviously like homophobia and biphobia across the board, but specifically in the Black community, there's rampant homophobia when it comes to not just Black men towards other Black men, but Black women. And so, like, I guess my question is how to navigate that space when you do consider yourself a bisexual man. However, you have people, that you would identify with shunning you specifically, Black women. A gay Black man obviously wouldn't have a problem with me, but a bisexual Black woman, from my understanding, may still have a problem with a man who has sex with men.
Yeah, go for it.
You know, I'm so, yeah, I'm out the box for the most things. I love people who they are. So I would love, a spouse who was bi. I'd be like, yes, So I just say you have to find your niche. You have to find what works for me. I found people, online. You can find people that identify that you want to represent in your life. And kind of remove the negativity and the hate out of it. There has to be groups out there where you can find someone who identifies and loves you for who you are and say, I don't care if you're straight, bi, or whatever. You're cool, I like you, let's go out. And so I know it's going to be difficult because I think people think that the Black community hate is hateful of LGBT issues. I don't think that's everything. I mean, I think it's different in people and live in the suburbs and the cities and things like that. I think you just have to find your people and be with people who get you, and then you won't have that hate. And that's how I live my life. But that's helpful.
I also just wanted to expound on what you were saying, just being a late bloomer, because I myself was a late bloomer. I came out, let's see, I'm gonna be 34 a week from today. So I came out 4 years ago, so on the cusp of 30. And yeah, I grew up very hetero. I grew up also evangelical Christian, speaking in tongues and casting out demons side. So that was rough to unfuck my brain from, you know? And then, yeah, doing the down low type of bisexual stereotype of shit. And then dealing with your own masculinity, but then also sexuality. So I totally get where you're coming from. And then having to, slowly but surely walk into that. And it's been the journey for me, just in the last 4 years, and then being comfortable in my skin and being like, hey, I'm bi. Like everybody knows it now, publicly between my friends and my family, but also online. So it's a bit hard, but I'm just wanting to affirm you that you're not alone on your journey. And I've been through that similar journey too. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah. Also, can we applaud our late bloomer? Also, I just want to reaffirm to everybody, there's no timeline for coming out. Whenever is the right time for you is the right time. So don't feel pressured by anybody. If you find your way, whenever you found it, here you are, man. You're here. And we're going to move on to our next question. Ooh, what just happened? Something. Oh, there it goes. We're good. All right. So I'd like to direct this to Lauren and Salem, just so that way we're making sure to get everybody's voices on here. Why is bisexual representation so important, whether it's in journalism, film, television, or any other form of media?
So during the pandemic, we kind of shifted a lot of stuff at the place I work, and we've been I'd say we're 100% remote work, with maybe 95% of the time we're actually all working, outside of each other. Sometimes we get together and go to the library together and work and stuff like that. We had hired on maybe 5 or 6 people while 2020 was going on, or actually a couple of them in 2021. So I still have a small handful, but still a handful of coworkers that I've actually never been in the same room with physically. And this, for me, during that whole process, kind of brought back a lot of early memories of coming out at the workplace, and really reinforcing why that's important, why we need that kind of flexibility and confidence in where we work to be able to have a conversation without worrying about pronouns necessarily in terms of, who we're dating, who we're hanging out with, what kinds of things we're going to. Now, I work for an alternative news weekly that has covered the underground in Chicago for 50 years. So we definitely, on the surface, you would think we're totally fine. And guess what? We are actually a pretty accepting place. But there's still other people's perspectives and stereotypes that go into that. So I made sure that, dropping my sexuality into conversations when appropriate was something that I was doing, especially with the newer people that were unfamiliar with me. And then it occurred to me that this is something that I should be talking about through my platform that I have with the paper. So I did a column talking about bisexuality that we published online, I think sometime in 2020, just kind of reinforcing. So I'm 48. I've come out thousands of times in my life. I've come out thousands of times to the same person sometimes, I think a lot of you can relate. You can have people in your life for years and years and years, and they only see you in a certain realm. Maybe there's somebody that you've played tennis with for, every weekend for years. You're only talking about tennis. And then they see you with a same-sex partner for the first time or something like that. And you can tell that they're having an internal conversation. And I think that another one of the wonderful list of, challenges that we all have being in the alphabet community, as I talk about it, is that sometimes we have to do a little bit of work for other people. So for those of us who write and edit and work in media, I think sometimes we have to do that over and over again. That's what my column was about. I also talked about my coming out process with my some of the elders in my family when I was in college. So I grew up here in Chicago, went to this nightclub called Berlin, which is still there on Belmont Street. I can't remember what the theme night was, but there was some theme night. We were all dancing, and there were these guys with these huge cameras, video cameras. And my friends and I were kind of obnoxious, so we didn't really care. We were dancing in front of the cameras. We didn't even know what it was for. And then halfway through the night, the DJ got on the mic and said, "Listen, this next 15 minutes is definitely going to be taped for Oprah. So if you don't want to be on Oprah or have the chance to be on Oprah, get off the floor. You can go over to this corner." And again, obnoxious friends, youth. So we're just being idiots. And then my grandma saw an Oprah show montage that was about men on the down low.
No.
And there was my stupid, personage just wiggling in front of a camera. And that's how I came out to my grandmother.
Work.
So, retelling that story over and over again has been funny and embarrassing. It came up at a cousin's wedding as part of a toast. I wasn't involved in it. I don't know why. But I think that we sometimes forget living our lives that other people aren't in our heads, and we also forget, or at least I forget, I don't have kids, and through the magic of the internet, sometimes I'll run into, someone who you find out is 15 who's going through something, and your immediate reaction to what the comment is, "Oh, we figured that out 30 years ago." No, this person didn't, they're just figuring it out now. So, just like people did for me when I was, 15, 19, whatever it was, sometimes I need to step back and reinforce, this is why I chose this language for myself. This is why I evolved that language years later when the language evolved alongside. This is why I make these choices. This is why I present myself in this way. It's more work for us, which is great. Like, we all need more work, but I think in the long run, it's important work. So.
Also, I just want to say that is wild that you
Yeah.
came out on Oprah.
Great story.
That's like the best coming out story I've ever heard. So thank you for sharing that, Salem.
So I think that it was proper representation is important because, was that the question?
Oh,
I just want to make sure I'm
I've got
getting
it
the prompt
written-
right.
No, I've got it written down in my terrible handwriting that I was told looks like a serial killer once. So there's that. It's why is bisexual representation so important, whether it's in journalism, film, television, or any other form of media?
Okay, so uh, it's important first off because I'm sick of seeing and hearing all of the things that people describe bi people as, which still happens all the time. And I mean, that's what this whole panel is it's not all about that, but it's like, that's underlying this for me at least. I wrote down a list of things that like, I feel like people are always like, this is what bi people are, and and it's not. So I'm the precursor to that list, but like cheaters, fickle, undecided, they don't actually exist, on the road to gay town, straight if they're with a non-gay or cis person, or it's a phase, which was unfortunately what some family members have like said to me when I was with a cis man for a long time. And what I said to myself, and that's really why I think representation is important, because I told myself for a very, very long time, I'm not queer. I can't be part of this community, because I am not living that openly, that I have passing privilege. If I never wanted to tell anyone ever again and I'm with this person for the rest of my life, no one would ever have to know. And it feels very isolating because this like stigma that bi women are not queer enough and bi men are just gay, and that we can't just be bi or be queer and be all of those things. And I still struggle with that very, very, very intensely, like every single day when I get up. And so I think if I had grown up with more characters that weren't described like those things or weren't portrayed in those ways, that maybe my mornings wouldn't be so shitty sometimes, and maybe I'd just be like, this is fine, everything's fine. And again, not every bi person feels this way, thank God, right? It's just the way that I've struggled with it. And I also had to note that we have Susan Sarandon now, so if no one saw that, apparently it was like, she'd said it once, but then like didn't say it again, but now she said it again. So anyway, so that's why I think proper representation is important. And I also want to just underline the data that Nico pointed out about trans people, trans and non-binary people, the fact that more trans and non-binary people and more people of color are identifying this way, like that is another level of like, you don't hear about it bi-ness. That needs to be like, look at this, these people, hear them. And I would love to see that so that people don't have to have the struggle and don't have to be later in life questioning these things and wondering about themselves, and can just be and be comfortable.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for your vulnerability. Before we move on to our next question, I threw out this note card earlier because I was like, you're not going to say this. And I'm like, I'm going to say this. Since Lauren was sharing a little bit about stigma, I was once told by a guy I was dating in college, we didn't date him after that, that bisexuality was a hippie new age affectation. And I was like, thanks for sharing. Goodbye. So. Yeah, it's real. And bi people hear this, I think, in many forms in all parts of our lives, whether it's sort of like explicit or implicit. And
Wait, I have one more thing.
oh, no, don't be sorry.
Late in life guy, me too. So late in life people, woo woo.
Yeah.
But also just you'll know your people. Just to like, and the people that are like, meh, like those aren't your people. I mean, like that's so hard though in the moment where you're like, but they're cool and I want them to be my friend. But it's like, you're like, I came to my bi-ness more comfortable with it because of white gay men that were like, you're queer. Like, and I hated that it had to be that person for me to be like, a gay person is telling me I'm queer. I hated that. But I was so grateful for those friends that were like, get over yourself. You're one of us. And they're my rocks, they're my platform. They boost me.
Thank you. So for this question, I think I want to turn the first response to Lauren Beach. We have two Laurens on the panel, dueling. And Lauren, and this will then be for everybody up here. What are some mistakes you see journalists in the media make when it comes to truthfully depicting the lives of bi people without stigma?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question. And Lauren, I think you just started to get at some of these things, the stereotypes of biphobia being taken as the truth in the press is incredibly damaging. And the other thing I wanted to say about some of it, like when people say that bisexuality is a stop on the way to Gay Town, if that's true for you, think a bisexual organizer. Because seriously, if bisexuality felt safe for you to come out into in any way, shape, or form, like if you feel like that's really something that helped you along, that's because the B was put on the map by bi people. And so if that does feel safer for you, like think a bisexual community member, a bisexual organizer. And also if it's something that isn't your truth, because sometimes you do see this in the press, well, the bisexual, bi now, gay later, like I think is one of the taglines for this. And if that's treated as fact in the press, that part is damaging because it says you don't know yourself as well as I do. And how could you think of that as anything but damaging to people's sense of self and mental health? And so if you're putting out things around bi people are not really bisexual, despite that 56.8% of people in the most recent Gallup poll said, yes, I'm bisexual when asked if they're part of the LGBT community. And that number is going up all the time. You've got to ask yourself, what am I writing and why? Also, thinking about bisexuality as binary really bothers me as a non-binary person because I am not binary. So why would you erase millions of people's lives because you think that you understand semantics and rhetoric better than people understand their realities? So I think that's also incredibly damaging. The idea that pansexual is supposed to be inclusive, sometimes people even say inclusive of trans people, which is also offensive to trans people who are like, hey, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I might identify as trans, I might not. Like the idea of like pansexuality includes you and bisexuality doesn't cast doubt on the idea that trans people, trans men are men and trans women are women. So this idea that I've seen a lot, like there's been so many articles, especially in the last few years, of like, what is bi and what is pan? And the idea of bi is binary and pan is not, is deeply problematic and harmful. And it also doesn't reflect the lived realities of so many people. The last thing about one of the things I educate a lot when I talk about bisexuality is people will say, bisexual people are cheaters, they can't be trusted, they spread STIs, they don't, they're either inherently polyamorous, hypersexual, or maybe they're not even real. And then you get to that last one, and you're like, wait, you just told me all this knowledge that you have about bisexual people. Where does that come from? If bisexual people aren't real at all, how do you know these things that you just said are true? And you sometimes see this idea of bisexual erasure is also incredibly prevalent in the media and the press at the same time as all those biphobic stereotypes. And so it's like this split consciousness of like, how can these realities coexist? And again, why are you writing about it? Like, do better. The comment about NLGJA and like the name not reflecting our communities, it's like you're telling on yourselves. It's 2022. That's what I have to say about that. You are telling on yourselves about how you see the community, and you can't say that acronym out loud. Come on now. So, and the last thing I want to say about the representation is I just don't see anything about joy. I don't see anything about flourishing. I don't see anything about thriving. I'm not seeing the diverse voices that represent our community that we know from our data in the press, and that needs to change. And I'm also currently pregnant. I don't know if people can see that right now. I'm 6 months pregnant. And I have a 10-month-old, so you can do the math. But you don't see much about parenting or family formation. And when you do, like it's often read as, well, you're a parent, so now you're following a heteronormative script. It's like, no, I'm following my bisexual best life, thank you. And that's what I would like to see.
And I'm just going to add to that because, as a space that I have, Step Up for Mental Health in 2009, the I Am Visible campaign started because I couldn't sleep. And I had a 12 o'clock panic attack about why isn't white people represented? and I literally lost my job, and I was like, I want to do something. I want to write a blog. And I ended up talking to some, friends and stuff like that. And I'm like, I really want to do something. And Bisocial Network was formed. And now I was just going to write about it. And I didn't know that it was going to expand into, writers and people all over in the White House and all that kind of stuff. But I started the I Am Visible campaign. We're still talking about this in 2022 about people don't see themselves. And this is why I turned the Bisocial Network, BSN, and working with Bi community in mental health, because you talked about married people who are bi. I'm a person who's married, but also seniors. We forget about seniors because bi people, where do bi people go when I talked about Berlin? That was my stopping stone. But where do bi people go when they become seniors? We have a lot of spaces that say L or G or T, but they don't think about the bi community. And I just really want to stress that there's a lot of people in the bi community who are reaching out on our helpline, for example, who are asking for help because they're isolated, they're alone, and they don't have a community. They don't feel like especially the pandemic has been unbelievably difficult for the bi community. And I just want to stress that, I want to see representation. I want to see stories. I don't want to see people changing names in papers I want people to ask the person, what do you identify as? Do you identify as bisexual, pansexual, whatever it is? Stick to what they say. Because I feel like the media has changing it to not make waves or something like that. And I really believe it's important to identify the person what they say they are. Okay, that's my little thing.
No, that was a great answer.
Yeah, for me, I think it's important what both Lauren and Adrian stated, specifically for our elders, and then specifically what folks within the trans community, whether they identify as bi or pan or even non-binary, that has to be included when it comes to journalistic integrity. And also when it comes to people of color, I can't stress that enough. There needs to be more representation of people of color and not just like showing somebody who's bi and no offense, they're white, because there's more in the Latino and African American community and Asian community and Middle Eastern community folks that are bi or bi trans or even pan, and they make up, 50% of that population, and then for a lot of folks, they're afraid to come out because they don't have that safe space or they feel like their family members won't understand them. And it's like we've had folks come to our events, where this is a safe space for them to be, but when it comes out to the rest of the world, they really can't be themselves. So that's just a couple points that I wanted to bring up to you. I do see we have a quick question.
Yeah, and just to add one thing to something Augie was saying, that I think it's also, so my friend Jen Richards, who's amazing, often says that the answer to every problem of representation is more. And I think the same is true with bi people. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, or I'll get in trouble, but who cares? This year, I happen to know that for the Bi Coverage Award at NLGJA, initially there were no submissions at all. And they had to, when the deadline was about to close, they had to reach out to all these additional people to just ask them, what articles do you know that have come out? Who can we invite to submit for this? Because there was nobody who put an article up for it. And I was thinking to myself, I ended up submitting something. I didn't win because the piece wasn't very good, but it was fine. But I was even thinking to myself, how many bi articles have you even seen published this year? And it was really hard to think of any of them. And the one that ended up winning was terrific. Denny's amazing. But it was so sad to me, like as a bi person who works in queer media, I couldn't think off the top of my head of a single article about like bi lives that had been published in the past year. That's really telling and that's really bad. And I think we need, you know, as change makers in the room, need to fix that. And I would like to move on to our question from this person in an absolutely fantastic outfit.
Oh, well, thank you.
Bringing the fashion.
Thank
I
you,
love
thank
it.
you. It was the only thing that was like not dirty, so I mumble, so I'm gonna go ask this. So when you had mentioned something about like, oh, bi people are like automatically assumed to be polyamorous, and that like triggered something within me as well. Like, I identify as a member of like the relationship non-monogamous community, and I feel like there's a lot of intersectionality with the bisexual community as well. And like, talk about a community that's very stigmatized. Like, I mean, there are very few people who don't seem to have a problem like dismissing that community in some way. I find it very that even like amongst the queer community, there's a lot of stigma there as well. And I was just kind of curious to hear like from the panel, you know, if that's something you've experienced or kind of your take on that.
Yeah, am I allowed to go first? Is that okay? I'll say that so I came out to my grandparents as bi in an email. God, I know, right? Like 12 years ago, I think, something like that. We'll say 12 years. And they were fine with it. Everything was great. I came out to my grandmother as poly, and she had a really hard time with that. That was the thing that like broke her. I talked to her, I told her over the phone, because my younger brothers had already known. And I just like, I don't know why I wanted to tell her, but I just did. We're really close. And I was like, I tell her everything, so she can handle this. She just got really quiet. And I said, and I asked her if she was how she was feeling and if she was okay. And she just didn't say anything. And I said, I joked, oh, would you have just rather I not told you? And she said, yeah. And I went, oh, okay. And I think that that sort of speaks to just sort of the myriad ways in which people experience stigma. That if you're a bi person, and let's say you don't experience stigma because of the fact that you're bisexual and you date people of more than one gender, you can experience it in all these other ways because of the ways in which you experience attraction or you carry out that attraction in your life, because bi relationships look like lots of different things. So I think it just really speaks to the complications of this whole thing. And personally, as somebody who's both bi and poly, I really appreciate that you brought that up.
Yeah, I appreciate that saying that it triggered something in you. I apologize for that. I think when I was talking about the context of biphobic stigma, it's the assumption that all bi people are polyamorous. Yeah. No, I want to make sure that I apologize because I think that I didn't speak to that point in the way that I should have. And I do think there are many people, like so many bi people, so many ways, and many bi people are ethically non-monogamous, or they are polyamorous, or they are in an open relationship in various ways, and that that a lot for many people, like the relationship configurations can be fluid too. And that is important to center, especially also in the context of parenting, because that's another angle that comes up with if you go in to see a healthcare provider and you're like, I'm married and I have a husband, then they assume that you go down this one script, that your family is only one way, that you are a cis het, and that you would be parenting in a certain set of ways. And there's just a lot that intersects around relationship formation, family formation, biphobia, and how that intersects with other stigmas that are, I think, important to highlight. And there's not much representation at all in the media on that, and I think that should change too.
I'm getting the wrap it up Julia Roberts sign. A little deep cut Oscar joke for you. So I'm gonna make my last question, and it will go with yours after that, if that's okay. Thank you. What are some things that the journalists and reporters in the room can do to better reflect the diversity and authenticity of the bi community? Yeah, take it to the reporter.
Thanks. So my response to that is actually informed by some of the conversation that we've just been having. I think you know, for the people who are writing about other people's lives in the room, you know, whether you consider yourself a journalist or not, we've several people that I work with that, you know, came into working for a newspaper saying, I'm a writer, not a journalist. Well, you know, if you are trained as a journalist, you get trained in certain ethics and a series of principles about what that means, right? So the basis of which is that it's our responsibility to accurately document the lives of other people, you know, and we're accurately documenting what's going on with those other people in the world, right? We're reporting on, the news is basically talking about other people's lives, right? And how they're interacting with each other. And part, I think, of one of the benefits of the tools of the principles of journalism is that you need to really dive into what someone else's life is, which includes what they've chosen for their identity, right? And that's something that has been skipped over a lot of the time when people who write the news are writing about people in our communities. You know, for me, I think that covers the conversation about different kinds of relationships as well. You know, how many times have we read, you know, let's say like Family Circle, Women's Day, People Magazine, like a mainstream publication, and you're reading about some actor or something like that, and you know, it's, you know, I don't know, Angelina Jolie, whatever, however old, 154, comma, you know, and her husband, Bruce Willis, whatever, I don't know, right? Yeah.
Couple
So-
for the ages.
This is why we have copy editors. Anyway, so you read that. What would it feel like to read? You know, here's Angelina in her lovely appointed home, her girlfriend Salem sitting on the couch, while her husband Bruce is making frittatas for everybody in the kitchen. And there's nothing around it, right? Like, so that is something that journalists can do. We can represent these lives the way in which the people who are actually living them choose to be represented. And so I think we've seen language evolve, because language is not set in stone. Language is an evolving thing. We've seen people's relationships with hard subjects evolve over the years, and I think this is just part and parcel of that. So that I think is the challenge to all of the journalists in the room, to just remember that you're there to accurately report, and that means asking somebody what their pronouns are, asking someone how they want to be represented, and that's part of just being accurate.
I recently learned this thing referred to as the platinum rule. You've heard of the golden rule. This is the platinum rule. It's treat people the way they want to be treated. And I feel like that's very important to enter into the space now.
I'll try to be quick.
No, I also think Lauren's going to be the one to bring us home, because I do want to be invited back to the conference, and we are
sorry.
over. So I also just want to thank everybody for coming and for listening to me blabber. I am not great at this, and I'm just really happy to share this space with you and to be part of this discussion. It's been really wonderful. Lauren?
I think that this is something that all people can do, whether you're a journalist or not, is don't make assumptions about people. And I did this recently with a close friend of mine who's married. I'm a bi person, she's married, and I made like a, well, kind of like a you've never experienced this kind of jab. And she was like, Lauren, I'm bi. And then, God, I'm such a crier, I'm so sorry. And then she was like, you know better than that. So don't make assumptions. Don't assume someone is a lesbian because they're with a female presenting person. And if they're a lesbian, great, and describe them as lesbian. But don't assume just off of what someone looks like or what you feel like you're putting on them.
Thank you. You're probably in a room of criers, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. So I do want to say that if you'd like to hang out, if it's okay, and just ask us more questions, we can do that in here for as long as we are legally allowed, or move that into the main area there. But I know that we have a lot to say. I know everybody has a lot of things that they want to know. It's a really deep topic. I think this requires more than an hour. I would love more time than that next time. And yeah, so thank you again. And do you want to ask your question now?
Yes.
Oh, if you want to leave, if anybody wants to leave, go for it.
I guess then my question will be to the panel and to you from the media. And in the bi communities, then you will represent, and you represented the media, uh, how do you all view from your organizations and from what you do in every day, the bisexuality in multicultural and mental health attached to it? And I don't want to put another layer to the cake because we have many layers already. But I do want to bring up here, and I would like to hear for some of the panel, that multiculturalism in the bi community is important because it speaks up of the culture that a person belongs to and how comfortable that person is in the bisexuality. Like a macho man, if he's bisexual, is more or less okay, or this and that. So mental health and bisexuality in your own world, in your own worlds and work, including the media.
Yeah, I was actually, I was wondering if our researcher, Lauren Beach, would like to respond to this. Just, I think if I can sort of sum up the question a little bit, if that's okay. When speaking about the bi community, why is speaking about mental health particularly important? The spirit sticks dead.
Mental health is really important because mental health is affected by a sense of isolation. And that when you feel like you don't fit into any world, that's very isolating. And what's helpful to help be able to address mental health in addition to access to healthcare, which bi people are also less likely to have, and that's been shown in a great number of surveys, is a supportive community. And if you're looking for, when you're thinking about multiculturalism and different intersections of cultures, that means also finding a community that can embrace all of who you are, and being able to build that and find that is really important, I think, for people's sense of self, that they can be who they are. And there's many, many reasons why people might have mental health, they might be depressed, they might have, there are many ways that mental health can affect people's lives. And I do think that the solution is a combination of access to healthcare and also fighting back against stigma, because stigma also makes you sick. Yeah. So if we could think about those things, and I think the piece of multiculturalism deserves perhaps its own panel too. Like, what does bisexuality look like across the world? What does it look like if you are an immigrant? What does it look like even with different voices that could have been on this panel? I think we'd have so many people, so many answers in so many ways. But I appreciate the centering of mental health, and I also want to thank Adrian for all the work you do with Step Up for Mental Health in the bi community.
Yeah, Adrian, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I just want to say, because that's one of our goals with Step Up for Mental Health. When we bring in like even volunteers or staff or whatever, we are trying to be inclusive, diversity. We have a lot of people who are on our helpline, for example, who are South Asian, and they talk about. I find it interesting that a lot of groups of people have some of the similar issues about mental health, about stigma, and whether you're Asian or Latino or Black or white or Jewish or whatever, that I feel that we have unique things, but they kind of come together. They're afraid to come out. They're afraid to talk about mental health. They're afraid to talk about who they are. And so I'm always interested in that, and we try to do things like in groups, because I think sometimes people feel comfortable in spaces that they won't feel like they're judged. And so sometimes you have to have, I know people are like, oh, we're all together, but I think sometimes you have to have those, whether you have a peer support group that are connected, where South Asian people or because literally Asian people have been brutalized through the pandemic. We did a campaign on that, literally talking about don't beat up Asian people. I mean, what the heck? And so that mental health is a big issue that's been happening. And so I think we need to kind of like really bring that home, that we're all struggling, but and we all want to identify and be loved. And if we can kind of go into that space of just accept people who they are, and who they love.
Beautifully said. I'm gonna make that, I'm gonna have that take us home for the day. I do before so we're gonna go out to the common area. I'm gonna hang out. I imagine everybody else has a moment to hang out if you have more questions, but I do wanna just let everybody plug themselves for a second. So we're gonna go alphabetically. Adrian, what's the best way for people to follow you? I've got your Twitter handle up here, but how else can people find your work?
I'm
Keep up with
everywhere.
what you do.
So stepupformentalhealth.org. You can also check out Bisocial. Well, everything is on stepupformentalhealth.org, bisocialnetwork.com, and we're on everywhere: Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, but it's not really there yet. But
TikTok isn't real. Bisexuality is real. TikTok is not. We are going alphabetically because I'm very organized. You wouldn't know it from this panel. But Augie, how can people follow you?
For my personal, pretty much that is everywhere you can find me, AR Film Chicago. So Twitter, Insta, YouTube. And then I'm under Augusto Augie Rodriguez on Facebook and LinkedIn. And then when it comes to Bisexual Queer Alliance Chicago, our handle is BQuack Chicago. So you can find us on Insta, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube that way. And we also have a Discord channel.
Yeah, but BQA Chicago right here.
Yeah.
Cool. And then Lauren Beach, how
just
can
one
people
thing, Step
find
Up for
you?
Mental Health more so, because that's my political handle. If you're gonna go there, I'm gonna be political. So I'm just letting you know. Step Up for Mental Health.
Wait, which one is your political one?
Adrian McHugh. I'm
Oh.
really political there.
Oh.
So just let you know, that's personal.
I'm ready for it. Let's do it.
My Twitter at Lauren B. Beach is a great one to follow me. I have a completely context collapsed life, so I tend to tweet about everything there. And Vis Impact Fund is the Twitter handle for the Visibility Impact Fund, which I also, a number of us share that Twitter responsibility, but I'm one of them. So you can follow me there as well. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Lauren.
Yep, VIS Impact Fund, yep.
And now Lauren part 2.
I have public Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook that are all my DMs are open on all of those, so you can reach me that way. Also, my email address is at lmcgahy at dallasnews.com, so same thing. And I didn't say this at the top, but I'm based in the State Capitol Bureau, which I did say. But this year, I asked my bosses to only let me cover gender, sexuality, and politics in Texas. So that I've been doing that since February. Yeah, it's been really tough. But so what I cover is if it touches the LGBTQ community in Texas, that's what I cover. So if you have story ideas, particularly about queer joy, which I'm always trying to do more of because there's a lot of shit out there, DM me, and yeah, thank you.
And also
And
just,
sorry for being messy.
no, who isn't? And just to plug Lauren for a second, Lauren is like one of the best LGBT reporters in the country. So if you are not following her work already, you absolutely should be. And then we're gonna cry, it's fine. And then Salem?
Yeah, what is the relationship between bisexuality and low self-esteem? That's what I want to know.
Oh God, wrong panel. Wait till next year.
So Hollow, HOLLO is me on Twitter, and it's public in the bio there. There's one of those like quick link things, and you can find all of my other social media through that. ChicagoReader.com, Chicago Reader on all. We're not on TikTok yet. It'll come soon. Yeah, go to chicagoreader.com to find out what's going on here in Chicago. You can find me there too. My email's there. And if you have story ideas, complaints, concerns, tips on music I should be listening to, whatever it is, my DMs are open. So I welcome your correspondence. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I've already got my own, thank you. And also make sure to follow Tiffany the Mall Girl. Took me a second to find her last night. And I also just want to applaud all of you for coming and for being so patient. It was just, yeah, this is lovely. Thank you for your time, for your patience. I hope you enjoy the rest of NLGJA. Is that okay?
That was great. Thank you.
Oh, are you kidding? Sure. Thank you for the question.
I guess I put it out of my mind a lot.
Actually, so feels like it always. I want to say hello to my classmate.
Well, I mean, it's like there's so many like layers to everything that it can really hard to get like the breadth of all the subjects. So I was just so happy you said that.